I am Raymond Porter. I'm 68 years old, and last Tuesday, I watched them lower my only daughter into the frozen ground of Cedar Hill Cemetery in Minneapolis. But before the priest could even finish his final prayer, my son-in-law grabbed my arm, leaned in close, and whispered, "You have 48 hours to clear out your things from the lake house. After that, I'm changing the locks." He smiled at me. He actually smiled, like he'd just won something. My hands were shaking. Not from the cold, not from grief, from something else entirely. Something he couldn't see. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just looked at him, at this man my daughter had loved for 15 years, and I nodded slowly. "All right, Derek," I said. "I understand." He blinked. He wasn't expecting that. He was expecting the broken old man routine, the pleading, the tears. I gave him nothing. I turned and walked away from my daughter's grave, past the mourners, past my neighbors who had known me for 40 years, and I got into my old pickup truck. Derek watched me go. I could see him in my rearview mirror, standing there with his expensive black coat and his designer sunglasses, looking confused. He thought he had just inherited everything: the lake house, the land, the life my wife Martha and I had spent 5 decades building. He had no idea what was coming. Before I tell you exactly how I took back everything and uncovered a truth more terrible than I ever imagined, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And please like and subscribe to this channel if you believe that patience and truth will always defeat greed and lies. My daughter Sarah was 44 years old, healthy, strong. She ran marathons. She taught yoga at the community center every Saturday morning. She had her mother's smile and her mother's stubborn streak. 3 weeks ago, she collapsed in her kitchen. Brain aneurysm, the doctor said. Sudden, unpredictable, nothing anyone could have done. I believed them. At first, Derek played the grieving husband perfectly. Black suit, somber expression. He held Sarah's hand in the casket like he couldn't bear to let go. But I watched him. I've been watching people my whole life. 60 years in the construction business teaches you to read faces, to spot the liars, the cheaters, the ones who cut corners when they think nobody's looking. Derek's eyes weren't wet. They were calculating. Every few minutes, he'd glance at his phone. Quick little looks, like he was expecting something important. At the reception in my lake house, the house Martha and I built together 35 years ago, Derek played host. He poured drinks. He accepted condolences. He acted like he already owned the place, which, according to him, he did. After the last guest left, after the casseroles were put away and the flowers wilted on the dining room table, Derek cornered me in the kitchen. "Raymond," he said, and I noticed he didn't call me Dad anymore. He hadn't called me Dad in months. "We need to talk about the property situation." "Property situation?" I said, my voice rough from a day of holding back tears. He pulled out a folder from his briefcase. Legal documents. He spread them across the counter like he was dealing cards. "Sarah signed the lake house over to me 6 months ago," he said. "Power of attorney. She wanted me to handle all the real estate matters. You know how stressed she was about finances." I looked at the papers. I saw my daughter's signature at the bottom. But something was wrong. The S in Sarah was too tight, too controlled. Sarah always wrote with big looping letters, just like her mother. "She never mentioned this to me," I said quietly. Derek's smile tightened. "Well, she didn't tell you everything, Raymond. The truth is, this house should have been in our name years ago. You've been living here rent-free, using our resources." Sarah was too kind to say anything. "But I'm not. Our resources. The house I built with my own 2 hands. The land my father bought for $300 in 1952. You have 48 hours, Derek continued, his voice dropping. "Get your things. Get out. This is my property now, and I'm selling it. The developer from Chicago is offering $2.3 million for the lakefront parcels. I'm not losing that deal because you want to sit around feeling sorry for yourself. $2.3 million. For land that had been in my family for 3 generations. I should have been angry. I should have shouted, thrown something, called him a liar to his face. Instead, I felt something cold settle into my bones. The same cold I felt when Martha passed 12 years ago. The same cold that told me to stop, to think, to plan. "All right, Derek," I said. "I'll be out by Thursday." He actually laughed. "Just like that? No fight? I thought you'd make this difficult." "What's the point?" I said, making my voice weak, tired. "You have the papers. Sarah signed them. I'm just an old man with nothing." Derek patted my shoulder like I was a dog he'd finally trained. "Smart choice, Raymond. I'll have my lawyer send over the formal eviction notice, just to keep everything legal." He walked out of my kitchen. I heard his Mercedes start in the driveway, heard the crunch of gravel as he drove away. I waited until the sound faded completely. Then I went to the bedroom, to the closet I hadn't opened since Martha died. In the back, behind her old dresses that still smelled faintly of her perfume, was a lockbox. Inside was a phone number I'd hoped I'd never have to use. I picked up my phone and dialed. "Margaret Chen's office," the voice answered. "How may I direct your call?" "Tell Margaret it's Raymond Porter," I said. "Tell her I need to call in that favor from 1987. There was a pause. Then, "Please hold, Mr. Porter." 30 seconds later, Margaret Chen herself was on the line, the most feared estate attorney in Minnesota, the woman who had handled my family's legal affairs for 4 decades. "Raymond," she said, her voice warm but serious. "I heard about Sarah. I'm so sorry. What did he do?" I told her everything. The forged signature, the 48-hour deadline, the $2.3 million deal. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was like ice. "Pack a bag, Raymond. A small one. Leave the house tomorrow morning. Make it look like you're giving up. And then you come to my office, and we begin." I didn't go to a shelter. I didn't sleep in my truck. I drove 45 minutes to downtown Minneapolis, to a high-rise building that overlooked the entire city. Margaret's corner office was bigger than my living room. She was waiting for me with coffee, the good kind, and a stack of files that made Derek's little folder look like a napkin. "First things first," she said, sliding a document across her mahogany desk. "The signature on Derek's power of attorney is a forgery. I had our handwriting expert look at it this morning. The pressure patterns are all wrong. Someone traced it, so we can prove it's fake," I said. "We can prove it's fake," Margaret confirmed. "But Raymond, that's not even the point." "What do you mean?" She smiled, the kind of smile that probably terrified opposing counsel. "Derek thinks he's dealing with a retired construction worker who owns a nice lake house. He has no idea who you really are." She opened one of the thick files. I saw the familiar gold lettering on the cover. "The Porter Family Trust. Your father," Margaret said, "was smarter than anyone gave him credit for. When he bought that lakefront property in 1952, he didn't just buy your parcel. He bought 12 miles of shoreline." I nodded. "I knew this. And when you married Martha, you transferred everything into the trust. You and Martha spent 30 years quietly buying up the surrounding properties. The farmland, the old logging roads, the mineral rights. Martha handled most of that," I said softly. "She was the smart one. She was brilliant," Margaret agreed. "And she set up this trust specifically so that people like Derek could never touch it. You don't own that lake house, Raymond. You never have. The Porter Family Trust owns it. And as the executor of that trust," she paused, looking at me over her glasses, "I can tell you that Derek's little power of attorney isn't worth the paper it's printed on, so he can't sell it. He can't sell anything. He can't even step foot on that property without trespassing." I sat back in my chair, feeling the first real breath I'd taken in days. "But Margaret," I said slowly, "if the signature is forged, and Derek is trying to sell property he doesn't own, that's fraud." "That's exactly what it is," she said, "which is why I've already contacted the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office. They're very interested in having a conversation with your son-in-law." "He's at the lake house right now," I said. "He's probably already meeting with the developers." Margaret glanced at her watch. "Then I'd say he's about to have a very unpleasant Thursday morning." Derek was in the middle of a champagne toast when the sheriff's deputies pulled into the driveway. I know this because my neighbor, old Mrs. Patterson, was watching from her kitchen window, She called me the moment she saw the squad cars. Raymond, she said, her voice shaking with barely contained glee. There's 4 deputies on your porch. That son-in-law of yours is yelling something about his rights. Oh, honey, they're putting him in handcuffs. Thank you, Carol, I said. I appreciate you keeping an eye on things. Are you coming home soon? I said. I have a few more things to take care of first. Derek didn't stay in jail long. He made bail by Friday afternoon, but the damage was done. The fraud charges were filed. The forged documents were seized as evidence. And the developers from Chicago, upon learning that the property was tied up in a legal nightmare, quietly withdrew their offer. But Derek wasn't finished. He never was. The following Monday, I turned on my television to find Derek's face plastered across the local news. He was sitting on a park bench, looking haggard and sympathetic, while a young reporter with perfect hair nodded along with his story. I just don't understand why he's doing this, Derek said, dabbing at his eyes with a handkerchief. My wife just died, his daughter, and instead of grieving together, Raymond is using his money and his lawyers to destroy me. The reporter leaned in. You're claiming that Mr. Porter is using his wealth to manipulate the legal system? That's exactly what I'm saying, Derek said, his voice cracking perfectly on cue. Everyone thinks he's just a simple construction worker. But Raymond Porter is a multi-millionaire. He owns half the lakefront in Wright County, and now he's using all of that power to frame me for crimes I didn't commit. He looked directly into the camera. I loved Sarah. I would never do anything to hurt her memory. But her father, he never accepted me. He never thought I was good enough for his daughter. And now that she's gone, he's finally making his move. I sat in Margaret's office, watching the broadcast on her wall-mounted television. He's playing the victim, I said quietly, making me look like the bully. It's a smart move, Margaret admitted. He knows he can't win in court, so he's trying to win in public opinion. Make you look like a rich old man picking on a grieving widower. So what do? Margaret turned off the television. We do nothing. We don't respond. We don't give interviews. We let him talk. Why? She smiled that cold smile again. Because every word he says on television is another lie we can document. And because while he's busy performing for the cameras, my investigator is busy finding out what really happened to your daughter. I felt my blood go cold. What do you mean? What really happened? Margaret pulled out a new file. This one was thin, but the papers inside looked like medical reports. Raymond, she said gently. Sarah didn't just have a brain aneurysm. She had a brain aneurysm after 4 months of unexplained symptoms. Headaches, confusion, memory problems. Symptoms that her husband dismissed as stress. She mentioned the headaches, I said, my throat tightening. She said she was just tired. Did she mention that Derek was putting something in her morning smoothies? The room spun. I grabbed the edge of the desk. What? Margaret slid a photograph across the table. It was a bank statement. Derek's bank statement, showing regular purchases from an online chemical supply company. Bromide compounds, Margaret said. In high enough doses, they cause neurological symptoms, confusion, memory loss, and in some cases, they can weaken blood vessels in the brain. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. My investigator found the receipts, Margaret continued. He also found text messages between Derek and a woman named Kristen. They've been seeing each other for 3 years, and according to those messages, they were planning to get married as soon as Derek could take care of the situation. Sarah, my baby girl. The situation. He killed her, I whispered. He killed my daughter. We can't prove it yet, Margaret said, but we're getting close. The medical examiner is reopening the case. We're requesting a full toxicology analysis. I stood up. My legs were shaking, but my mind was clear. Clearer than it had been in years. What do you need from me? I need you to stay calm, Margaret said. I need you to let the process work, and I need you to trust me. I looked at her. This woman, who had protected my family's interests for 4 decades. Margaret, I said, I've trusted you since you were a 5-year-old paralegal in my father's lawyer's office. I'm not stopping now. The next 3 weeks were the longest of my life. Derek continued his media campaign. He went on podcasts. He He gave tearful interviews. He painted himself as the victim of a wealthy old man's vendetta. But the truth was working its way to the surface. Margaret's investigator found more. So much more. Derek's girlfriend, Kristen, wasn't just a mistress. She was a nurse at the same hospital where Sarah had been treated for her headaches. She had access to medical records. She knew exactly which symptoms to expect. The text messages between them were damning. Messages where Derek complained about Sarah being too healthy to die naturally. Messages where Kristen suggested specific compounds that would be hard to detect in a standard autopsy. And then, the final piece. Security footage from the pharmacy in Hutchinson, showing Derek purchasing a large bottle of potassium bromide, the same compound that was later found in trace amounts in Sarah's bloodstream during the second autopsy. The Hennepin County prosecutor filed murder charges on a cold morning in December. I was in Margaret's office when we watched the press conference. The same reporter who had interviewed Derek was now standing outside the courthouse, describing the arrest of Derek Morrison, accused of murdering his wife Sarah Porter Morrison in a scheme to inherit millions in lakefront property. Derek was let out in handcuffs. He wasn't crying now. His face was a mask of shock and rage. He looked directly at the cameras and shouted, "It's a setup! The old man did this! He framed me!" But nobody was listening anymore. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The prosecution presented the financial motive. Derek had been living off Sarah's money for years. He had gambling debts. He had a girlfriend who was tired of waiting, and he believed, incorrectly, that Sarah owned the lake property outright. They presented the text messages, the pharmacy receipts, the testimony of the toxicologist who had analyzed Sarah's blood, and they presented the forged documents. The power of attorney that Derek had created to steal property that Sarah never even owned. Derek's defense was simple. Blame me. Blame the rich old father-in-law who never liked him. Blame the lawyers. Blame everyone except the man who had slowly poisoned his wife over 4 months. The jury didn't believe it. On a snowy Thursday afternoon, they delivered their verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder. Guilty of fraud. Guilty of forgery. Derek screamed when they read the sentence. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. He screamed that I had destroyed him, that I was a monster, that he would find a way to make me pay. The bailiffs dragged him away. I sat in the gallery, feeling nothing but a hollow emptiness where my heart used to be. Sarah was gone. No verdict would bring her back, but at least she had justice. I didn't go back to the lake house right away. I couldn't. Every room reminded me of her. Every corner held a memory I wasn't ready to face. I stayed in a small apartment in Minneapolis for 3 months. I read. I took walks. I let the silence wrap around me like a blanket. And then, on the first warm day of spring, I drove back to Wright County. The lake was beautiful. The ice had finally melted, and the water sparkled in the April sunlight. I could see the reflection of the pine trees on the surface, just like I'd seen every spring for 40 years. I walked through the house. My house. The house I'd built with Martha. The house where we'd raised our daughter. The house that Derek had tried to steal. I stopped in the kitchen, at the window that looked out over the water. "What should I do now, Martha?" I said to the empty room. "What would you do?" I already knew the answer. I'd known it for weeks. I just needed to hear it in my own voice. The next morning, I called Margaret. "I want to set up a new trust," I said. "For the land." "What kind of trust?" "A conservation trust. I want to preserve the shoreline. No development, no condos, no fancy resorts, just the lake, the way it's always been." "That's a lot of money to walk away from, Raymond." "The developers are still interested. I don't need the money," I said. I never did. That's what Derek could never understand. It was never about the money. I paused, looking out at the lake. "But I want to do something else too. Something for Sarah." I told Margaret my plan. A scholarship fund for nursing students. Not just any nursing students. Students who came from difficult backgrounds, who might otherwise fall through the cracks. Students like Sarah would have helped if she'd lived. We're calling it the Sarah Porter Morrison Memorial Scholarship. Every year, it will send 5 young people through nursing school. Every year, Sarah's name will be spoken at a graduation ceremony. Every year, Her legacy will continue. Derek will spend the rest of his life in prison. The property he tried to steal will remain protected forever, and my daughter's memory will live on in the hearts of young people she never met. That's how you truly win. If there is one thing I have learned from this nightmare, it is this. The quiet ones are always watching. The patient ones are always planning. The people you dismiss as old, weak, or insignificant, they are often the ones with the deepest roots. Greed is loud. It brags. It demands. It thinks it can take whatever it wants. But truth is quiet. It waits. And when the time is right, it speaks in a voice that cannot be ignored. Thank you for listening to my story. Now, I have to ask you, what would you have done in my position? Have you ever been dismissed or underestimated by someone who couldn't see your true value? Have you ever lost someone you loved and had to fight for their memory? Let me know your own story and where you are watching from in the comments below. Your stories remind me that I'm not alone. And please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel so I can continue to share these stories of justice, patience, and the quiet strength that lives in all of us.